So we are blessed actually. We've got sort of a dream team here on our panel, and it's going to be fun to hear them handle some of the questions. And you know, the objective here is to get everybody in the room comfortable with the cannabis world as far as investment opportunities, what you can and can't do with property, what to be aware of, you know, the good and the bad. So we've got a couple of years now where it's been behind us, and I think we've got a great panel of people here to take care of it. We'll take the rose amongst the thorns first, Amy. William says she's sort of the legal ninja, so she's reputed to be one of the top cannabis lawyers in the business, and we're blessed to have her here, as I said. She's a shareholder with Green Spoon. We actually changed that because that just happened, last week, Amy, or a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, we joined officially on January 1.
Yeah, so it's just been a few weeks, but we're happy to have you here. I know you've got a lot of stuff going on. So she is a founder and director of the Oregon Cannabis PAC and the Oregon Cannabis Association, which is the largest professional cannabis association in the state of Oregon. Primary practice areas are licensing, compliance, and regulatory work, as well as continuing to represent clients charged with crimes in either state or federal court. She is also directly involved with the state's policy discussion around implementation of medical and recreational cannabis. She's been tapped to serve on a number of rulemaking committees. We've got our panelist at the far end is Sam Chapman. He's spoken here before. My first exposure to Sam was actually the first one of these presentations we had, and I had a great panel up here, and I've got this redheaded guy in the back answering questions. My panelists couldn't, so I said, well, who is that guy? And we had to get him up here. So Sam co-authored the bill legalizing rec. He is
medical marijuana dispensaries.
Okay, dispensaries. He owns a company called New Economy Consulting. He deals with a lot of people coming into the area. He's a wealth of knowledge, information for people if you're interested in the business, interested in, you know, the real estate issues here. Our final panelist is William Simpson, who is the founder, CEO of Chalice Farms, and I look at it as sort of the boutique dispensary in the state. And he got involved with it through mother was sick and needed to deal with some things, and sort of got involved with the medical cannabis side, and that works very well. And he said, hey, we've got to make this more available. Got involved, put Chalice together, and Chalice is a vertically integrated producer, processor, retailer based in Portland, Oregon, currently serving medical patients, now rec patients, rec users since October of 2015. Unique in the cannabis industry, Chalice's fully integrated business model provides lower production costs, standardization, quality control, distribution, which also leverages affordability of labor in Oregon, giving Chalice Farms a very competitive market advantage. They do products, all right, and he's won some awards with the products. Chalice products have captured the coveted, you might not know this, Dope Magazine People's Choice Award, all right? And a handful of other awards at the annual event, as well as capturing 2 first places in the annual Oregon Medical Marijuana Cup. So we've got some great sources of information here today, and I've got a series of questions we're going to ask. At the end, we'll give you about 10 minutes to fire away with your own questions. So thank you for coming and participating today, and we're going to start with one of Amy's questions that I just got. So William said I could ask Amy anything I wanted to ask, but I'm assuming he meant on topic. So this is a question probably everyone in the room has, and it's come up a couple times, and we're going to hold her to her answer. It's going to be the gold standard answer to this. But first question, many landlords are concerned about asset forfeiture. Can you talk a little bit about this issue?
So I want to start by saying this is not legal advice, and you all have to sign a disclaimer, it's on your table, that you're not going to hold me to this answer when they come and take your property, which they would never do because they're not seizing assets right at this moment. So I just want to give you 15 seconds of background. I have been touching this space since 2002, and before there were businesses, there were people being charged with crimes for engaging in this same conduct. And so I practice, and I still practice, in federal and state court doing criminal defense work in this space. And my new law firm, which is the first national law firm to have a robust cannabis practice across the entire country, really wants me to focus on how this is a business. But for the purpose of answering this question, I want you to know that I'm not just making it up, that I actually do civil and criminal asset forfeiture cases. I've done them across the country for cannabis, and I've done them in both state and federal court here. So I get asked this question all the time. Landlords call and they want to know how much risk is there in leasing to a cannabis business. And how many of you here, I don't really have a sense of how this is broken up, are landlords? So quite a few of you. And how many of you are brokers? So between the brokers and the landlords, we get this question all the time. And here is the answer. And I know Sam is going to talk about the Trump administration, so I am not going to. But the answer is, up until January 20th, what I would tell you, and really what I'm going to tell you until I hear differently, is that I have not seen an asset forfeiture case regarding a piece of property since about 2012. That is 5 years as I calculate it now. And there are a few reasons for that. One is, and remember, you can have your assets seized in state court, you can have them seized in federal court. It's much more likely to happen in federal court than in state court because state court's kind of lazy about asset forfeiture and you just ask for your stuff back and they give it back to you. So it's much more likely to happen in federal court, and our United States Attorney's Office, until it comes and gets gutted, is very, very supportive of the cannabis industry. They have followed the Cole Memorandum. Has anybody heard of the Cole Memorandum? Everybody. Okay, so if Cole Memorandum says we're not going to prosecute you unless you're breaking these 8 tenets of the law. So the United States Attorney's Office here has not been prosecuting people unless they're actually breaking the law, in particular, those 8 points of the Cole Memorandum. So I cannot promise you that your property won't get taken. What I can tell you is that I haven't seen it for a very long time. My colleagues have not seen it for a very long time. That we have a nice relationship with the United States Attorney's Office here, and they have been they've really stuck with their commitment to not prosecute people. And as long as you are using and working with good operators and you have some protections in place in your lease, you should be fine. Again, it's not a promise, this is not legal advice. You're gonna forget I said this when you walk out the door, but I feel comfortable enough to say to a room of you that the risk has become increasingly small, that will happen with the exception of if you have bad actors in your space. I don't know what the hell Donald Trump is gonna do. Sam maybe knows, so.
You're the one that knows all. So Tom, if there's a problem, you're probably happy to help wherever Tom's head is, right? Where's Tom?
I'm always happy.
Yeah, he's very happy to help. Got it. So with what Amy just said, I've got to ask William, hey, is cannabis a good real estate partner?
So the truth is, cannabis can be a horrible real estate partner, or it could be an amazing real estate partner. And what I mean by that is, like in any business, you have to vet your operator. You have to go in and do your due diligence, just like with anything else. I mean, you have highly sophisticated individuals with phenomenal backgrounds, great business acumen, credit, and all the capital in the world that you'd want to work with. And then you have people that are, ending up on the news, blowing up a location in Astoria because they were, somebody that learned how to do butane hash oil in their garage as a teenager. Now they are a newly printed president of a company. So, I mean, it comes down to really understanding the operator you're working with. Last year alone, we made our real estate partner $2 million. I mean, I think we're a phenomenal real estate partner. Because you have to do things by the law. Now there is a really robust system that helps you vet these people. The Oregon Liquor Control Commission has a licensing process that delves pretty deep. I mean, it goes into high-level background checks. It's makes sure you understand where the funding is coming from. You have to have your land use compatibility statements in order, so you know the zoning was correct, and that's going to mitigate a lot of potential risk and issue. But it really comes down to doing your homework. I mean, you have to, if you have a tenant or a client or a buyer, you want to understand the jurisdiction they're in, because in the state of Oregon, there's the time, place, and manner. It's different between every single city and county, so you want to actually be involved with those planning commissioners and find out what the actual rule is. And then again, it comes down to working with a good operator, like any business. They can be one of the best partners in real estate you've had. But it does come down to the operator. So.
Thank you, William. So Sam, With that said, is the cannabis real estate market a bubble? If so, what can investors do to insulate themselves? And I have to ask that, knowing that there's roughly, for our Eugene friends, I think you've got 42 dispensaries in the cities of Eugene and Springfield. I don't know how many liquor stores are down there, but 42 seems
Like
to be
5.
Yeah, so, Sam, go for it.
Sure. So I think the important thing to recognize for anyone getting into the industry when it comes to the real estate market as it pertains to the cannabis industry is understanding the differences between a state economy and what I think eventually will become the national economy. Right now, all the commerce happens in a vacuum inside the state of Oregon. And so that coupled with local regulations, which often, at least from a retail perspective, limits the amount of retail dispensaries that can be in one area, right? So you really need to start looking at any other market forces that you would for any other business. What's saturation look like? How hard is it to get a local license? Does the city even want this business in their area right now? And I think that, we're starting to see, especially here in the city of Portland, landlords are asking, ridiculous rates, and cannabis people are paying them. I think that there's a lot of people that are looking to buy warehouses or lease warehouses, for example. And I think that there's a big market for indoor grown cannabis, but I think there's even going to be a bigger market for outdoor grown cannabis simply because of the economy of scale and the overhead it takes to produce this product. So what does that have to do with real estate? Well, if you're leasing to a tenant who doesn't actually know how to do their P&Ls or futures on the next 5 years of their crop, and they're not accounting for the eventual drop in price, which will be half in the next couple of years, I would imagine, you're going to be stuck with a tenant who can't pay their bills anymore. And eventually, once the market starts to realize the economy of skill a little more and the actors become more professionalized and continue to kind of move forward towards the model that you need to survive, which is William's model, which is well capitalized, surrounding yourself with a team of specialists who do one thing really good. I think that that's extremely important. And in terms of the bubble, I think there's a local bubble. I think in the next couple of years, if not the next 18 months, that real estate will, in the cannabis realm, to a certain degree, drop significantly because there's the valuations of these businesses that are going on right now is fairly astronomical in my mind, to say the least. I don't know if you've ever seen any of these for sale dispensaries or what have you, but there's a lot of nooks and crannies in which things are hidden in these original advertisements, and that is not, you can't buy a license. Licenses are not transferable like that, and the fact that, these people are paying, 3-4 times the market rate for their places, I think is something to take account of. Now, people that are playing it for the long term, like William, understand that eventually federal prohibition is going to come down, and when it does, he's going to be extremely well positioned to capitalize on a national market. That is how you survive the bubble. I think that 50% of the businesses over the next 18 months are likely to fail for several reasons. There's a lot of things going on from a very specific standpoint in Oregon right now, whether it's the testing regulations that people are getting caught up in, not being able to keep up or understand, or maybe the regulations are just bad on their face, or they don't make sense for whatever reason. The transition from medical to recreational. There's a lot of people who have been growing a lot of quality product for many, many decades in the medical market that are working their way over into the rec market. There's going to be a huge failure rate there as well. And I think that, just the regulatory issues are going to, weed out a lot of these unsophisticated players, and we'll be left with the majority of the market that will run its course over the next 10 years. So I do think there's an additional bubble coming. Does that mean you can't make money from a real estate perspective? Absolutely not. I think it comes back to vetting your clients. Again, the OLCC process is a great way to do that. At this point, for my consulting firm, clients don't interview us. We interview the clients because it's so easy to take someone on who just throws you a $5K retainer and then does nothing and is a complete failed business. I mean, if I wanted to be a used car salesman consulting, sorry, any used car salesman in the room, you know, but if I wanted to be a run and gun consulting agent and made $3 million last year and have 20 employees, I would have done it. But I'm much more interested in helping businesses succeed that have the right team that are going to be here for the long run. And I think that, you know, as landlords, as you know, people that are potentially buying and selling cannabis properties, is extremely important to understand, at least from a 10,000 foot level, where the market is at now and where it's going, because it directly correlates with everything that has to do with your property and cannabis in general.
Thank you, Sam. I like that weeding out, right?
I tried really hard not to use that.
Yeah, I know. So we've had discussions about, you know, interstate stuff, and you know, one of the things, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's unique about Oregon is money can come into the state of Oregon where you can't cross state lines typically with investments, right? And Amy is going to sort of dovetail into, you know, your question on what other states should we be looking at with this, but some things that are sort of interesting, you know, with us. I mean, you start looking at indoor versus outdoor. You look at, you know, Sam and I had talked about like Detroit, Michigan. You know, somebody buys cannabis there versus buying it here. For people in the wine industry, you can understand that the value of the stuff here is greater. I mean, people like it. So, Amy, when we look at these things and you look at your ability to invest in different areas of the country, and with your question, what other states should we be looking at? What are the benefits? You know, what are the things that make Oregon's market so great that the investors and brokers in the room need to be aware of, and what opportunities are here? And if we look outside the state, where should we be looking?
So I want to answer that question, I think, from the tail end moving forward. So we are seeing states drop every election cycle. Occasionally we'll see a state drop legislatively, but for the most part we are seeing states drop each election cycle. And cannabis is probably the most popular issue that people are voting on right now. For example, in Florida, medical cannabis with a broad and open bill passed by 72%. Nothing in the entire planet can get 72% of the votes except cannabis. So I think it's important to recognize, and I don't know here how many of you are doing your own real estate investment or who work in other states, but when you're looking particularly at neighbor states, we saw California go, it's going to be a recreational state. We are seeing we do a lot of work in California, we have lawyers in California, I pretend to practice law in California on occasion, and even though I should go down there more often, I don't get a chance to, and it is an amazing place to make some real estate investments. They are just seeing the beginning of the boom. And part of what makes this interesting, what makes it interesting if you're a cannabis company and what makes it interesting if you're a commercial real estate person, is that this is a moment of high risk and high reward, where if you make the right bets on your local jurisdiction, the right bets on states that are going to flip from medical to recreational, the right bets on the person who you are putting in your space, you can be very, very successful. We also have talked to people who are in, and I'll use California as an example again, jurisdictions where they've spent $35 million on a building and they don't know what the California licensing process looks like yet. So that's a huge bet. I mean, some brokers super psyched, but that is a huge bet to make without knowing if they're going to be able to get a license. So it's an interesting moment. And if I were thinking about the other states, I would be thinking about Nevada, I would be thinking about California, I would be thinking about Arizona, even though we haven't seen it go rec yet. I would be thinking about Florida, even though we're just working with the legislature down there. If that market opens up, it will be open before California opens. Even though they're just medical, it would be a broad program, and they have the second biggest population of people, and the age of those people are more likely to use for medical purposes than any other state. So I would be looking at these states as they fall and thinking, if I am going to place bets, where am I going to place those? And you can flip that question and say, do I have a good operator? So I think the best operators in Oregon are also thinking about where they're going next. So if you have a tenant who you like, and you think this guy, you have William in your building, and William's gonna take us along for his next pitch, between Sam and I. So you have William in your building, and William might be thinking about 4 or 5 other states he wants to go to. And maybe, just maybe, you might be able to purchase some real estate for him. And you can, if you find a good operator who is looking towards the future, who has done a good job in this state, you can become longtime partners in the way that you make your real estate acquisitions and find tenants for that space. So it can go both ways. There are a lot of states, there's states that are gonna come up next, but for right now, Maine is online, Alaska's online, and you just need to do that same level of due diligence. I know it's harder to manage something from far away, but now is the time to place those bets on the markets that are coming online. I think they also asked me about Oregon, why Oregon's so great. Because I still think, maybe contrary to what everyone else on this panel thinks, I think we're just like at the very beginning of this market. Like, it is still anybody's game. We are a tight real estate market in Portland. There are enough local jurisdiction, regulations, and rules that the market is tight on its own, even if it wasn't tight, because a lot of people are moving here and opening businesses. So I think it's still anybody's game. And I also think a lot of existing operators, the ones who succeed, are going to need more places to operate. So Oregon's a great place to do business, and so are a bunch of other states.
Thank you, Amy. So William,
Yes.
seems these businesses are making a huge amount of money. Is it safe to assume the real estate market can capitalize on these large earnings?
So I want to give you guys an exact example. So, I mean, it'll make it real clear as to, when we're talking about people can pair up with real estate partners, what we did with our investor, we bought 2 properties. This is one example. We've done this a couple times now. We bought a piece of real estate over in King City for about $520,000. We put $300,000 in tenant improvements into it to make it a Chalice store. We did the same thing over in Northeast Portland. It was a $620,000 purchase, and we put about $250,000 in tenant improvement. Chalice understands its P&Ls, we understand our operating expenses, we run a really tight ship, so we understand what type of cap rate we can have and what we can afford. And so we were able to do that backwards math, figure out what made sense for the business, and it meant that in 2 properties that we were in a total of 1.69, we could sell it for 2.6 at a 6.25 cap rate and make a real estate investor really happy. We did that. We closed the deal. We had 1031 money come in. And then we did our own exchange, a tenant improvement exchange from that profit into a 60-acre parcel that we're building out a monster greenhouse and support building. So not only did we profit from my real estate side for the investor, but then we kept rolling forward. And it makes all the sense in the world. It is sustainable, like Sam is getting at. A lot of these people don't understand business in general, and they are like, yeah, I'll sign up because we're making money hand over fist at this moment. Even though a lot of them don't understand the tax repercussion, and those aren't built into their P&Ls a lot of the time, coming back to doing your due diligence on the operator you work with. But there is money to be made, and you can do it sustainably. You just have to have the right operator to attach yourself to.
Thank you. Sam?
Let me just tack on one other thing. There is more money to be made in real estate right now than there is any other sector in the cannabis industry. Let me just nail that down for a second. It's immediate money to be made. If you're in the cannabis industry, the only way you're making money for the most part is if you're not paying your taxes. I don't know how many of you know about federal level taxes and how the cannabis industry is more or less screwed on that right now. But your margins are thin. Now, if you're William, maybe they're a little better because again, you have the capital to weather the storm. But again, I think we talk in terms of waves very often, right? So I think we're on maybe the 4th wave right now, which is this acquisition phase where everyone is placing a high value on garbage, and eventually it'll the market will straighten out after regulations, and they'll be stuck with an asset that they can't afford anymore. And that's when not only starting new businesses, but acquiring existing businesses is going to be a huge model. Any real estate broker that figures out how to get in the middle of that intersection is going to make a ton of money. And it all comes down to understanding local rules and regulations and how to vet your clients. That's all I want to nail down.
So with that said, what's the number one mistake you see people make when they're acquiring it?
They don't do local due diligence. And that's just something, I mean, so my consulting firm has been tracking local rules and regulations and helping craft and write them for a little over 2 years now. At one point, we were tracking over 100 different city and counties' local time, place, and manner regulations. That was stupid, because that's a lot of cities. But that's how we identify opportunities, straight up. I mean, it's political. Look, I mean, if you're in the, and I've said this to you before, actually, if you're looking to get into the cannabis industry to any degree, your business is politics, and all politics are local. Now, politics aren't for everybody, but if you're looking to really uncover a serious investment opportunity, you gotta go work for it. It's not gonna come find you, especially in the cannabis industry. I mean, sometimes deals will, show up, someone's gonna show up with a briefcase full of cash or whatever, and cool. But if you're serious about getting into this industry at another level, I think it's important that you recognize how to find these opportunities. I mean, planning departments are making recommendations on what zoning is allowed for certain types of businesses. This is all in meeting minutes of local cities. It's actually very straightforward. And if you can help not only guide those regulations, but answer questions and concerns, half the time that locality is going to turn around and say, hey, will you help us write these? We have no idea what we're doing. Now you're creating the business opportunity on your own. You're literally writing the business opportunity into the rules and regulations. And I don't say that very often, but I do know that there is still a large hesitancy from the majority of the real estate investor market as to getting in or not. And there's a very small amount of people that understand this that are making money hand over fist. So if you want to talk about those type of strategies, let me know afterwards. I'll give you a card.
So we had, the topic was some of the war stories too. So can you tell us a story of somebody that maybe made an acquisition a little bit one side of the line?
A business that shall not be named. A business that shall not be named bought, I think it was several $1 million facility in a county that sorry, I thought you were like making a gesture at me.
We know who it is.
Yeah, I know we know who it is. That bought a several $1 million facility in a county that had already prohibited the business in general. Like, they didn't even check the local regulations. They might as well have just burnt a briefcase full of cash right there on the spot. They attempted to, in the last election cycle, to fix it through the ballot. It failed. And now they've got an asset that they're trying to off that it's going to take. I mean, I don't know what's going on with the deal. I don't have any relationship with the business, but it was a pure example of how even people that have the capital that William has can still straight up, have no due diligence, and it's an embarrassing thing. Like maybe if you have that much capital, it's like $1 million here, $1 million there, whatever, right? But it was a bad deal, and it was literally. Sometimes you just call me with an address, and I'll tell you in general if the zone is correct or not. I mean, you could get that information fairly easily. Now, there's more detailed levels of diligence beyond, is this the correct zoning, right? Is there occupancy? Is there special use permit, right? Is there someone on the city council that's just going to try and screw with you because they hate cannabis, whatever it is. There's things that you need to figure out there, but it is the most common thing that we see. I mean, I get at least one call a week from referrals from the OLCC where they get calls from people that say, hey, I've got this property, it looks good from the state perspective, will you give me a license? The OLCC says, no, you have to check and see what the local jurisdiction is doing, and then I get a call, and half the time they don't even know that there are local rules and regulations, right? And every single county and city is different. It's a checkerboard out there, not to mention that some are open and some are completely closed, so it's really important to understand that fact.
Thank you. So William, the assumptions and questions around cannabis, big one that comes up for real estate are the smell and noise issues. How valid are these concerns?
This seems to be a pretty big one. I'm sure everyone in the room has heard about it. Cities are talking about it, creating rules around it. And it really, it just comes down to your operator again. It's really easy to take the odor out of the equation. We had an indoor grow farm that was literally connected to 4 retail businesses. And about maybe 3 years after we had been operating there, we came clean because we were going to sell the building with everybody else. Let them know. They went, you guys have been growing cannabis here? This is literally connected to the building underneath them. So it just comes down to best practices and working with people that know what they're doing. I mean, that is not something to be concerned about. You just have to do it the right way. The same thing with noises. I mean, there's a lot of weird regulations talking about, actually out in Clackamas County, we have a friend that is starting a farm. They are allowed to have an outdoor license out in the air, odors obviously everywhere. Once they learned they were going to do an indoor part to their farm, they all of a sudden had to do an odor study. And then they had to have a noise, some specialist noise scientist come out when there's a freeway. What was it? Acoustic engineer come out to see if the fan was going to be too loud. There's a freeway right over here. I mean, so some of it is just, fear from the local municipality not really understanding this. And then, groups like us are working with those people to educate them to see that these aren't issues. There are ways around it, though. They are not barriers to entry. You just have to know who to talk to and what to get approved, what to go through as far as your binder with the city, and make sure all those the boxes are checked off. So it isn't an issue. I mean, it seems to be a big one around the communities when I talk to different people that own real estate, or they have real estate and they're interested in leasing it out, but they're still hesitant because it's cannabis, and these are some of the reasons that they're hesitant, and they shouldn't be.
So we've got Chris back there with Summit to clean stuff up too, right? If there's some type of law.
We can talk afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. I thought you might be willing to. So, Amy, what are the risks and rewards of this type of investment? Maybe cover if you've had like common leasing issues, things like that come up.
Yeah, so my firm has a large real estate practice. We also have a land use lawyer who works in the firm. And frankly, I could have 5 land use lawyers and keep them all busy because, as you've heard now from both Sam and William, the land use component is a huge component of this. But, we look at a lot of leases. And I think that when you think about this, the risks are fairly obvious. You're going to get a shitty tenant and they are going to mess your building up. That's your biggest risk if you had put a grower in there. That's one of your biggest risks. You want to make sure that they're not going to mold your building out. You're going to want to make sure that you're not interfering with other tenants. You're going to want to make sure that they're not destroying the property. I mean, it is an intensive build out. You need HVAC. You have a lot of things hanging from a lot of places. You have climate control. If you do not have a good operator, you do not have somebody who knows what they're doing, they are going to come in and they are going to make your building messy. And they might injure it and they might cause real damage. And you're going to try and come after them, and they're maybe not going to have anything for you to come after. So if you are working with an operator, it really is about finding a good operator, not just a good operator from a financial perspective, but one who has the skill set particular to their space. William talked about the people who blew up the building in Astoria. We talked about, and I'm sure you've seen plate buildings and lawsuits where people have come in and from production destroyed the building. I mean, those are real issues. And those are issues with other types of industrial use as well. So I don't want to have you think that there are only good operators in every other industry, and then this one, there's like a huge amount of bad actors. It's just that this has poses its own unique risks to your building. The additional risks are that you won't be able to recover anything if they bail on the lease. I mean, I don't let my clients do personal guarantees, so if you send me a lease and it has one, I'm probably going to redline that. And then you're going to send it back and say you don't want to do business. But I don't like them. And so when you're looking for tenants, it's hard to not do a personal guarantee, but you also might be working with somebody who doesn't own anything for you to take anyway. So these are people who might have some personal wealth, but it is not traditionally accessible. So you risk not having anything to come after, you risk them leaving, you risk them losing their license, and you risk them failing. I mean, this is one of the questions Sam got asked was, is this a bubble? And the answer is, yeah, maybe it is a bubble, and if the bubble bursts, their business is over. So you might charge an exponentially high lease rate, but you should think about what you're doing when you do that. Because if you charge too high a lease rate, it becomes too expensive to produce per pound when the market prices drop. So you're getting this like short-term reward, And you're taking a really bad long-term risk. And so are the operators, but they might not have anything for you to come take. So your risks really are the things I outlined. The reward part is if you find a good operator and you are a reasonable landlord. I don't mean you shouldn't make any money. I just mean that you're going to find the sweet spot there where you're not extorting money because it's hard to find a place. You're going to find a good tenant. You're going to find a good long-term partner. You might find somebody who wants to take your other buildings. You might find somebody you can grow with in other investments, right? Maybe they need a promissory note. Maybe you want to become partners with them through some sort of convertible debt. Maybe you want to take them to another state and buy them some real estate there. This is a very loyal industry. And if they like you and they trust you, I'm making like a blanket statement, but this has been my experience, at least with longtime operators, that if you are a good partner to them, they will go forward with you. And the people who are successful and the people who are growing in this industry might be extraordinarily successful, and that would be an amazing partnership. So there are a lot of potential rewards, but you have to balance that out with the risks.
Thank you. Thank you. William, who's the typical, who's the cannabis tenant? Are these real businesses? But I'm going to, take that in and what's the typical space you need for one of the facilities? And obviously that's going to change whether you're growing or a dispensary or if it's, some type of combination of those.
So it's a huge spectrum, right? I mean, there's, I don't know how much the room knows about the cannabis industry, but you're looking at indoor and outdoor grows. Most of it's rural residential, greenhouse facilities, indoor facilities. Retail, there's a big spot where people make a mistake. They don't look at just traditional demographics and traffic counts and things. It's just because a landlord allows them to open up there, they think they're going to be successful. Not correct. A lot of the distressed asset opportunity out there right now, there's a reason for it, because they just placed their location in a bad spot. I mean, you don't see McDonald's or Starbucks off a back alley, side street, because they were allowed to open up. I mean, you have to have traditional business demographics, high traffic counts. Those are the types of things that good operators are going to already know. They've vetted it out. They have businesses that are currently operational all over the different spectrums of cities and municipalities, counties, and they know those counts. The industry needs every type of facility that you can imagine. I mean, there's so many ancillary businesses as well that support the cannabis industry. I mean, you're looking at packaging and legal and CPA and labeling, and I can go on for an hour. I mean, there's so many pieces to it. The retail piece is just the consumer side, the piece that you see as you drive down the road. But the back end to it, I mean, there is a tremendous need for space. And there's a lot of the right actors are out there that need partners to come in and build that with them. We make a whole truffle and chocolate line, and the demand for those products across the state went up so much we had to expand our kitchen another 6,000 square feet. So we needed an entire additional commercial space. We're a proven operator. We're not the only one like that. I mean, there are other good groups in the industry that you can go and find and work with. And it's just the demand is there. And you're going to see the consolidation of a lot of the bad actors and the good groups kind of basically taking them up and moving forward. And they're going to need more space, additional space for all of the above. Not to mention, I know, the statistics around it are kind of a little hazy, but they still say, I don't know if you guys know BDS Analytics, there's a couple different analytical sites out there that talk about this, but they say there's still about 60% of the consumer purchases are coming from the illicit market. That means there's still a huge amount of market share that the legal program can go after. I sit on the OLCC's Rule Advisory Committee, and we're working on a public service announcement. It's called Buy Legal. So, educating the consumer market, what you're doing when you buy legally, what local farmers, what local businesses you're supporting and doing good. And so I think we have a huge market share to go out there and gain, which is going to create some additional benefit and possibilities for investment. So.
Thank you, William. Sam, so you commented earlier about the cost of operating these things. William just talked about what the operations can do for a community. So maybe I've got a couple different I'm gonna try to ask the question in the form of a question instead of an answer, but, cost of tax, what happens with the taxes, what's going on with there? How long until the cannabis industry will have access to traditional banking services? We talked a little bit before the meeting about, ability to pay a rent payment even. And then also, since Amy, threw the T word out there, what you sort of expect to happen with the Trump administration and the industry?
Sure. So I'll start.
All in 2 minutes.
Okay. So I'll start with the Trump administration, and just so everyone understands, this is specifically about the cannabis industry, right? So I think the first thing that everybody on this panel will probably agree with is we have no idea what's going to happen. Everything is speculation right now, and it's all going to come from our personal experience within the political realm here in Oregon and other states and nationally. We've all been involved at lobbying at all 3 levels to a large degree, and I think it's safe to say that there's no safe answer to make any big bets on right now. With that being said, a lot has happened, and Amy already kind of started to allude to this, and I want to roll it out. I feel comfortable saying that cannabis is one of the biggest nonpartisan issues that is starting to grow in this country right now. What was it, South Dakota just legalized medical cannabis? South Dakota. Georgia has had a medical cannabis CBD law for children for several years now. They execute more people than anyone in the country. Regardless of what your stance on that is. I mean, there's a whole political spectrum here that is completely being dispersed because it's not a partisan issue anymore. And, I think there's something to be said for that. Now, in regards to the timeline of federal change, it's a big question, right? Every day it seems like a new little tiny spigot of information comes out for a bunch of people to speculate on, and they go wild with their assumptions, and then we get back to, well, actually we don't know anything. So the most recent was the Colorado DA for the city of Boulder has been tapped to lead a group of DAs in advising the Trump administration on cannabis. And it actually sounds like the Boulder DA has had some fairly positive comments on cannabis in terms of how it can create a new economy and how the tax revenue that's coming in is benefiting things that they would have never otherwise seen that tax revenue. I don't think it's safe to lean on the fact that the cannabis industry is bringing in all of this new revenue, but I'm trying to think of an example of the last time the federal government, it's a different situation, but when have they ever taken any tax revenue away from anybody? I personally think it's political suicide. Now, political suicide in this day and era has a totally different meaning than 18 months ago. So take that with a pound of salt. But I do think that there will be some challenges if the Trump administration or anyone close to it wanted to not only stop but kill this industry. Are there 100 different ways in which the federal government can press pause and even direct us or push us a couple steps back? Absolutely, right? But what happens when you kill a legal market? It goes back to illegal real quick, and all that tax money goes away. The teachers are going to start asking for cannabis back because the revenue coming in they weren't getting from anywhere else. It would just completely implode on itself. Now again, that may not be out of the realm of possibility. But again, when it comes to real estate, and this is what what I've been telling investors for a very long time, is that based on the fact that I think Tom actually brought it up on maybe the first CCIM meeting, where the only prosecution that had ever happened with a landlord was when the landlord was commingling with someone who was directly selling cannabis over state lines. You just gotta be an idiot, basically, to get in trouble at that level. But you have a solid asset that has a larger value in the cannabis industry, and if, God forbid, the whole industry crashes, you still have a solid asset. And if you had half a brain, you picked a piece of property that wasn't just good for cannabis, it was good because of traffic, it was good because you did an economic study on where the city is going in the next 10 years, because you tapped into the community and figured out what they want, where they want it, and what they like. This is business 101. And a lot of people are not there yet in the industry. And so I think that, while there's a ton of hesitation at the federal level and a lot of people are slowing down and pressing stop and banging their heads against a wall and pulling their money out to whatever degree, it's a larger risk than most people in this room are probably have taken before in other businesses, but that's the payoff. And again, and there's a little bit of political futures to be played, but that's where it's at right now. So I'm not going to give you any green light, but other people are doing it, and it seems that it looks good so far. We'll see what will happen over the next 4 years.
Thank you, Sam.
Can you address the tax issue that they brought up? Sam?
Do you want to take this one?
Sure.
Okay.
Are you talking about the federal tax issue?
Just in general, he mentioned the tax side of it. So
Just-
let's start.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we talk about taxes and cannabis, we talk about it in a few different places. We talk about it from a federal perspective, which is there is a IRS code 280E. 280E says if you're a drug trafficker, you cannot take regular business deductions. Imagine running a business that you cannot take regular business deductions from. Like, you would not run a business, right, unless you were very brave and good at math. And so, or bad at math, depending on your perspective. So, 280E applies to cannabis businesses. Without getting into too much detail, there are ways to take some deductions under cost of goods sold. That impacts different types of operators differently, but it is the most challenging for dispensaries and the least challenging for growers, and processors fall in the middle there, depending on your perspective. Service providers either do or do not fall under 280E, but it's a real problem, and it is preventing people from making a profit in this industry in a real and significant way.
On that note, with federal taxes, is the subject client allowed to take depreciation at this point on the actual subject building?
So that's a really good question. Are you asking if the tenant could take it or if you could take it?
Whoever the owner of the building is.
Well, so it depends on what so I think the answer is yes.
Okay.
I'm not gonna go too far, give you too much more, but I think the answer is if you are the owner and not the operator, you can still take the depreciation.
Well, that was a great attorney answer.
Yeah. I sounded super smart.
So, we'll open it up to questions in a second. I want to get through one last thing with Amy. So you just joined the new law firm,
Mm-hmm.
and so now you've got sort of a team within that firm nationally
Mm-hmm.
working on this. So what's sort of their outlook, or I mean, are you still learning that? You've been a month there. But what is sort of the attitude of that team with respect to things that Sam's mentioned and the new administration, everything else?
We're in an interesting, I will just say very clearly that I'm kind of left of left myself. But the firm is owned by two gentlemen, one who attended the Trump inauguration, and one who told me I could do an ACLU fundraiser next month. So they are, they're
All food groups.
exactly. So I mean, they're very bifurcated, but the firm has deep Republican, at least on one half, deep Republican roots, and is well connected in the Trump administration. It's not the proudest thing for me to say, but that is a positive thing. Anybody who can reach out and touch the Trump administration in any sort of meaningful way, and particularly on an issue that they are very invested in, is a good thing. And we have lobbyists in DC. We have a lot of people who are interacting in Florida. It's a Florida-based firm. It's a big AmLaw 200 law firm. And the attitude in that firm is that, and they took other risks. They do heavily regulated industries. They were the first law firm to touch timeshares in the 70s when timeshares were just happening. They represent strip clubs and alcohol and tobacco and all of those things. So I mean, they recognize this as an opportunity, but they're also true believers that this is medicine, that this helps people, and that it is an absolute civil liberty, and they've dedicated a lot of time and resources to that. The fact that we have a connection to the Trump administration and they're true believers helps. So they are not concerned. I don't know what kind of conversations Michael Martyr has had that's Greenspoon Martyr. I don't know what conversations he's had with them, but he has certainly not told us to hit the brakes. He said, go forward, grow this part of the practice, and keep people safe and businesses safe.
Thank you. So along those lines, William, you have a large operation out near the airport, right? That's sort of there for people to come in and check out from out of state. You want to just talk about that real quickly, and then we'll open up the floor to the questions.
If anybody wants to tour a facility, we have a 30,000 square foot campus. It's the first of its kind. It was when we built it in the US, it may not be anymore. It's basically seed to sale. The farm piece is actually under construction, but we have the full retail component. It's a showroom, it's a licensed retail store. We took the brewery model. You can actually see all the critical extraction, which is liquid CO2. It's how you take all the essential oils out of the cannabis plant, make it into a vaporization product, and or you can molecularly distill that down. That's how you get the oil ingredient for your edibles, so it no longer tastes like a pot brownie. It is a lemon chiffon truffle, tastes like lemon chiffon. But all of that happens right there on site, so you can see it through the windows, you can see molecular distillation, you can see CO2, so you can have an understanding of it. You can see all of the truffles and chocolates and gummy lines being created and made, all of our corporate office, HR, marketing. It's the full scale model there, so anybody is welcome to come out. It's out on Northeast Airport Way. If you just look up our website, chalicefarms.com, if you want to schedule a tour and just understand cannabis at a different level, I'm happy to show people around. It allows me to get away from the things I don't like to do, like P&Ls and whatnot, and go actually talk about my business, which is more fun. So, yeah, you're more than welcome.
Thank you. Brian, you had a question?
Yes. Do you feel like some of the counties that have been reluctant to open more stores or allow more stores are going to turn the corner when they start seeing more of this tax revenue coming in? Clackamas County, Marion County specifically.
Well, so Clackamas County is open to a certain degree. A lot of Amy's work, you can thank her for a lot of that, and the OCA actually, they did a lot of local lobbying in Clackamas County to open that up, and it was not easy by any means. In general, yes, I think over the next couple of years, once, assuming, well look, let me put a caveat in here. So we talked about federal taxes. We have not really talked necessarily about state taxes and how that is going to affect the market. There are several bills being pushed right now to one, completely overhaul the tax allocation structure that's happening right now, which I don't necessarily think is a good thing. I haven't read the bill line by line yet, but it's going to cause some fights in the legislature without a doubt. And there's a bill that is looking to up the amount of local tax that a certain city can put on the product as well. So why does that matter? Well, once the market actually stabilizes, which we thought was going to be at a 17% state tax and an additional 3% at local, now the local is going to come back and ask, or the jurisdictions or whoever it is that's asking, pretty sure it's Burdick. Yeah, well, I'll just, yeah. If you go from 20% over the next year and then you jump up to 25, right? I mean, it screws with the market a lot, right? And that's as the adverse effect is going to be more people. Cannabis is an elastic product. When the price goes up, demand goes down, and vice versa. And as the market stabilizes, that's going to become, a big factor as to whether or not, people are going to be purchasing these products in these stores. And I think that if we can keep that even keel with tax revenue, I do think that localities will slowly start to open up, right? And again, this is where opportunity lies. And I can't stress this enough, where your average operator is going to pull their hair out because they see that either a county or a city has complicated rules and regulations or is closed and they just walk away, right? That's a gold mine in my opinion. Sometimes it's as easy as going in and just having a conversation with these people because no one's ever asked them, what are your concerns? How can I help alleviate them, right? And so I think that plus tax revenue in general will open up a decent amount of these counties. And again, they're going to see their neighbors taking all the tax revenue. It doesn't make, the reason that Portland had so many dispensaries is because it was a gray area retail haven until we passed a law that legalized medical cannabis dispensaries, right? So, how many different gas stations do you actually see? How many different convenience stores do you see? I mean, it's going to get down to the same type of convenience level as any other business. So I think over time it will open up, and eventually, there are counties that can't employ 911 dispatchers. Over time, they're not going to have a choice, or else they just won't get reelected for the simple fact of not accepting tax revenue.
Thank you. So I'm going to hand over the mic to Andy. She can take a few more questions, and we're just in the interest of time, we need to wrap up. But afterwards, I'm sure you three will stick around for questions as well. So
Could you please address landlords who are renting to cannabis tenants? What's their ability to get debt? Has that changed? My understanding is if they got bank financing or any sort of financing through a federally, a chartered institution, was it possible? Could you please talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the concern is that the bank is going to call the note, and that has not really changed. Until there's a fundamental change in banking. So I'm going to say this in two different, it'll sound like I'm saying things outside both sides of my mouth, but I'm really not. So nothing has fundamentally changed about banking, right? We have a bank here that banks cannabis businesses. They're a local bank. They have not started lending yet, although I suspect they will eventually. But it's very, very, very hard to get traditional lending. And we've seen it happen a few times where we haven't seen asset forfeiture happen. What we have seen happen is somebody calls up the bank, they want to refinance their loan, the appraiser shows up, they see that there's a grow operation, and the bank calls the note because it's in violation of the terms. So there is not a good way to get bank financing, and you are potentially putting your note at risk if the bank discovers that you're in violation of the terms. That being said, I have never seen a bank, I haven't seen it, that doesn't mean it hasn't happened, affirmatively go looking for people who are violating their loan terms. It really has been mostly brought on by human error.
Or nuisance complaints.
Yes, or nuisance complaints. The flip side to that is it's an amazing opportunity for hard money lenders to get in and to make a few extra points and to do some real hard money lending. And that is one of the best ways to, one, I think, get into this, and to two, access loans for buying these kind of buildings. Okay, Brett.
I think the rules changed after the first of the year, if I'm understanding it right. We focus in the industrial world, so we have people looking for 5,000. What I understood is they can do 5,000 or 10,000 square foot grow operations. Is that correct? What about outdoor grow operations?
Up to 40,000.
Up to 40,000 square feet.
Flower canopy. So the vegetative immature plants don't count towards that license.
I see.
And it doesn't have to be 5, it could be 46, 32, I mean, up to, basically. And there's also 2 micro tier canopies that are smaller than that, too.
And is that per property?
Per tax lot, that
Per
actually
tax lot.
just clarified.
Depending on the municipality.
Well, so before we all start tossing out exactly what we don't know as land use advice, so the rule change, the OLCC is going to clarify what they mean by that rule. And so it used to be 1 outdoor license per legal lot and not tax lot. It's different. They mean different things, and a non-land use lawyer drafted those rules. And you could have as many indoor grows on a legal lot so long as there was no common ownership. They changed that rule to use a tax lot language, but I called OLCC to talk with them because we have many people who want to do lots of things on their property, and they have not determined how they're going to apply the multiple licenses on multiple tax lots yet, so do not rely on that change until they put out the clarification, which is coming. Go ahead.
I was hoping that maybe you could talk a little bit about the potential for the apparent fluctuation in OLCC and OHA regulations for testing to potentially be the needle that bursts the bubble.
You should talk about it, William.
So yeah, when October 1 happened, it was a horrible bottleneck. I mean, we went from 40 or 50 labs down to 3 that were accredited and allowed to test for pesticides. So, and over 60% of the oil was failing, which you had to destroy it by law. So that created a huge problem in the market. There was a huge lack of product on the shelf. That since then has started to change. We've been working closely with the policy advisor for the state, and they took it down to a control study, which is a much more affordable version. It allows for less tests. It is starting to get better. Even to further that concept, in the legislative concepts that are being put forth in the early session right now, they're looking at viewing cannabis more like an agricultural crop. So to alleviate those issues, because they understand that it is hindering the growth of the industry and the economic piece to it as well. So they're going to be making some sort of change. The way it is written currently, though, is a lot better, and you're starting to see the market catch up now. A lot of products are getting to the shelf. It took a lot more money, and a lot of people went away just because they didn't have the money to stay open and have their cash, their burn still going. You had to have a very good capital backing to survive that, or shut down temporarily and reopen. But it is all changing, thankfully for the better now.
Go ahead.
As the products were coming back and the flower wasn't passing the lab test, what were the main components that wasn't passing the flower?
Right, so it's a little technical. The flower was passing, and basically when you take a flower, it could have had a little overspray from a farm next to it, or someone illegally sprayed it, but it was still under the state's action level. But when you take it down through any type of concentration, whether it's hydrocarbon, non-hydrocarbon, you're concentrating it way down. And so once it's extracted, now it could be over that action level very easily. And so that's where it was failing. And that is right now one of the largest growing segments in the cannabis industry is the oil, and then of course the edibles, which you need the oil for the edible. So.
Are they giving you regulations of what products to use as far as like when you are growing the product and spraying?
They're starting to get involved. The Department of Agriculture has had a very hands-off approach to cannabis until recently. And now, but they are also governed by EPA, so it's, nothing is technically allowed to be used because it's federally illegal. So there's a lot of bureaucracy and issue around it, and the states are having to figure all this out. I mean, a lot of it is still a big education for all of them.
Jim?
I realize that the industry is still at, maybe not its infancy, but early childhood, if you will. Is there anything going on within the industry to try and develop model regulations or model operation rules that a landlord could refer to in a contract,
Well,
or could be used in talking to local officials?
well, I mean, I think they shut my mic off.
There it is.
I'm done. It's like the Oscars or something. So it's a really good question, and I think we're seeing some interesting things happen. So, I go to different states and talk to legislators, and there's this crazy phenomenon, which is, and I think we saw in Oregon here too, from a state level, every single state wants to recreate the wheel. Just like every grower here thinks they're the best grower ever, and that Oregon's the best place ever, or so is California or wherever you're doing it. And so we're seeing that at the state level. There's an attempt to try and recreate it and start from scratch. Even if they consult, it's only to say to the other state, no thank you. And we're seeing that kind of trickle down when you think about model regulations. And so you can take and export, and then I'm going to answer it from a real estate perspective. You can take and export these models, but you also have to understand that each cannabis community looks different. I'm spending a lot of time in Florida. I'll be there on Friday while you guys are all freezing and locked in your houses. And I spent a lot of time in Florida talking to their legislature, trying to get them to open that market up. And it's very different than Oregon, right? They don't have a long-time cultivation community. The people who want to get involved don't have the skill sets. They don't have this kind of institutional knowledge. So in that case, it's hard to create an exportable model. That being said, I mean, we have I know Sam does it and myself and other people, we can do a local government training. We can tell you what the talking points are. Those things are, we do one-pagers for places all over the country for local government conversations, California and Florida and Colorado and everywhere. But, we have model leases. We could send you, for the right amount of money, a model lease that we use that talks about all the ways you could protect yourself. We have risk factors that if you're taking investment. So we have those things standardized, but every place is very different. So it's interesting to watch.
I know that there are a ton of questions, and we probably could have made this a half-day event, but I do want to be respectful of people's time and go ahead and sort of shut this down, let people go who need to go, and I really probably don't think you're going to be able to leave the stage because you likely will be mobbed. But I do want to say thank you very much. I think it was incredibly informative, and so first of all, round of applause.